This is the Ezra podcast. Massive fight this weekend. You have Canelo Alvarez. Should be in your pound for pound. 1, 2, or 3. I think 1 and 2 is probably the only ones I really find acceptable for him. But I have him at 2. Right, I have Usyk at 1. That's a debate to have at another time. As far as resume wise, and who has the most notable wins, Canelo's going to win that argument. But it's as far as that heavyweight win over a guy that's arguably one of the best heavyweights at the time. And you're talking about weight gain, right? You're talking about covering weight classes. I mean, Usyk is going from 200 pounds to fighting a guy that's 250 to 260 pounds. Okay, that's a 50 to 60 pound weight that he went up, right? So that's why I have Usyk over. But this weekend's important because if Canelo wins this fight, I'm gonna have him take a number 1 spot back and on my resume pound for pound list. And mine is a resume pound for pound list, not just a pound for pound list where we have hypothetically you or imagine in your imagination you run in your mind what these guys could do, right? And not knowing him without any evidence or anything to back it up. Because if in that case, right, like these guys have pound for pounds and they're just like, who's the best fighter of all weight classes? If all these guys fought in the same weight class, who would win? You would have to you could make an argument that Boots should be on there, right? You could make an argument that Shakur could be on there. You could make an argument, but that's not the way I do it, because to me, you got to earn it. I can't just give it to you. It's fun to do that in boxing, but you got to earn it. You got to earn your spot. And on my pound for pound, my resume pound for pound, it goes off of wins, notable wins, how you looked in those wins, how dominant you were in those wins. If you won and it's controversial, well, that could knock you down a few. Now, I'm not going to completely hurt you. I'm going to go off the actual decision, right? No matter whether I agree with it or not, but it could knock you, right? But I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm going to count that as a loss. That's a loss in my book. It's like, I can't do that. Okay, what are we watching? Why do we keep watching that if we're just going to make up their own rules as we go along? Thank you guys for joining. This is the Ezra podcast. I feel like I maybe jumped the gun a little bit, didn't get into it. This is a boxing edition of the podcast. The reason why I say that is because I do MMA editions of the podcast. I will have an MMA edition up tomorrow for the Charles Oliveira versus Gaethje fight, but that's not why we're here to talk. We're here to talk Canelo versus Bivol. So let me no, not the right one. There it is, right there. We're here to talk about what is this fight going to look like? What does it mean in the grand scheme of things? If we're talking about what it's going to mean in the grand scheme of things, let's go to this. Here, this is something I did a few months ago. It's Canelo's top 5 wins. I ranked them, right? What are his top 5 wins? Number 1, we have Golovkin. Number 2, and this is a recent revision that originally I had lower. Number 2, I went to Kovalev. And a lot of people try to downplay the Kovalev fight because he was knocked out, right? Prior to that, he had 3 fights from the Canelo fight, he was knocked out. What they leave out is that same guy that knocked him out, he went back and got unanimous decision victory over him. Completely shut him out, right? That's the part they'll leave out when they bring that up. Then they'll say, oh, well, Yard almost had him out. And it's like, okay, Yard is a credible opponent. And yes, Yard did hurt him. You know how that fight ended? It ended with Kovalev knocking him out with a jab. Then they're going to say, oh, well, it wasn't enough training camp, right? So it's funny because people will say, oh, he was off you can always flip it to fit your narrative. Oh, he was too long. He was off a year and a half. It was too long. He was a long layoff. It was rust. Now Kovalev, he's too active, right? He was too active to get in there with Canelo. I also heard, oh, he didn't get to do a full training camp because he went on vacation. Even though when he knew the fight was set and he wanted it delayed, the B side, who was going to get one of the biggest paydays of his career, wanted it pushed off because he wanted to go on vacation. What the hell you do with your time is what you do with your time, right? I'm not here to make excuses for you. And it's funny that we buy excuses when it's convenient to us, but no one believes that Manny Pacquiao had a hurt shoulder, right? No one believes that. So we're gonna buy one excuse but not buy the other, and the other one's a vacation. You know how ridiculous that sounds to say, oh well, he was on vacation. You know how stupid that sounds? I can't believe someone actually told me that. But that's what they said. But I think Kovalev wins damn good, and it's at 175 pounds. Now, whether he could have the rehydration, all that, Canelo's the A side. But I'll tell you one thing: when he fights Bivol, there's no rehydration clause. There's no catch weights. It's going to be the weight. It's going to be 175 pounds. At number 3, I have Erisandi Lara, which Lara doesn't really have a lot of great wins. So sometimes it gets tough when you do these things. As far as like, why is this guy above certain guys, right? I think Lara was at top of his game when Canelo fought him. He had beat Trout after Canelo beat Trout. He, at that point, I don't think anyone was down that he was probably the number 2 guy at 154 pounds. After Lara, we go to Miguel Cotto. Now, again, Miguel Cotto was older, and the thing you're always going to hear with Miguel Cotto is that he was a small middleweight. They didn't actually fight at middleweight. It was a catch weight. It was fought for middleweight title, but it wasn't at middleweight. Canelo weighed 155. Cotto weighed 153. Okay, and Cotto just got off beating Sergio Martinez. Sergio Martinez is one of my favorite fighters. I know that wasn't the Sergio Martinez, but no one had proven that wasn't Sergio Martinez until Cotto did. Okay, so I had to give him credit. I can't just, nope, that one doesn't count. It counts. That was the guy. Sergio Martinez was the guy middleweight at that point. Now, Golovkin was there too, but Sergio Martinez had earned his spot on top of the middleweight division. He fought Cotto. Cotto beats him, smokes him. I know that's not the Sergio Martinez that once was, but no one had proven that he wasn't that one until Cotto did it. So I got to give him credit for that win. And then number 5, I had Daniel Jacobs. Now, with Bivol, where does he rank in this? I think Bivol's number 3. I'm starting to lean that it could be number 2. He just doesn't have enough credible wins to me. Now let's see what Joe Smith does with Bieraev. If he fights Bieraev and he knocks out Bieraev or gives him hell or whatever it is, maybe that could move up Bivol, right? These are changing. These could change after a win, right? Wins can age better over time. They just can. Like Mayweather's win over Canelo. When he beat Canelo, that wouldn't have been a top 5 win for Mayweather. I still don't think it really is, but because Canelo goes on to do all these things, you kind of have to, it starts working its way up. So these wins can get worse or can get better over time. So Bivol can, it could move, it could improve over time. It could get better. It could move to number 1. I mean, let's just see what Bivol does. But first of all, Canelo has to get that W first, but let's just see what he does after that. A lot of the things, what happens, and especially now, is a guy will get a massive payday, right? And you're fighting the best guy in the world against Canelo, which is Canelo, and you lose to him, and you got the massive payday, and you got a taste of what the number 1 guy looks like, right? What the best guys look like, what the elite look like, and they kind of lose that motivation to keep going. So then it kind of diminishes your win because, okay, this guy's undefeated, kind of his first time at that, kind of his first time at the top, right, with the elite level. And after he loses, he's no longer, he kind of loses confidence, and he has money now. He doesn't really need to do this anymore. So these guys the win never goes on. Like, it's not like, back in the day where you beat a guy and that guy still goes on to have a legendary career. We're not really seeing that in this era of boxing. So that's why kind of Canelo, I get him when he says these guys have to fight each other, right? Charlo, Benavidez, Plant, they have to fight each other, even though he already beat Plant. But he's saying gets to win. So when I beat you, we know who you are, right? If you guys all fight each other and the one guy comes out on top, I'll fight him because that way we know who you are. And when I add you on the resume, there's no doubting it. But when you beat a guy like Trout and then Trout goes on to lose to Lara, it's it knocks the win. It diminishes the win. So this is just, some people are getting pissed when I post this because they're like, he has better wins or he has more wins than this. And it's just his top 5 wins, in my opinion. If we're going off notable wins, I have that too. That's right there. I think he has 8 notable wins. I think Smith is very borderline to not being a notable win. But I think you go Triple G, Kovalev, Lara, Cotto, Jacobs, exactly as the other list. And then you have to go Trout, who had beat Cotto, right? When Cotto was still very good fighter at 154. Billy Joe Saunders, who has, wins over, pull the damn names. I'm going to blink right now. He has wins over Eubanks. He has wins over Lemieux, over Andy Lee. I think those are decent wins to make him a credible fighter. Smith won the super middleweight tournament. Now there wasn't, I wouldn't say it was, of the credible guys at that weight class. He didn't have none of the guys from the PBC as far as Plant, Benavidez. None of those guys were in there. I thought he had to be in there because he won that. He beat John Ryder controversially, but like I said, I go off official decisions. He beat John Ryder. I know. I thought it was. I'm telling you, it's very borderline. If people tell me like, it doesn't belong on there, I would hear the argument. I'm gonna say it does. Sometimes he was just, to me, he had the argument to being the top guy at 168 at that point. It's hard to say, oh, no, he doesn't belong on that list. So I'm going to say I have him at number 8. But 8 notable wins is damn good for the point where Canelo's only 31 is going to have a lot more notable wins going forward. Pretty much most of his fights going forward have been notable wins. Will Golovkin be a notable win, number 3 versus Golovkin? I think it will be. I think Golovkin kind of proved when he fought Murata that he still has something left. He's still a credible guy at middleweight. Now, him moving to 168, that's not a weight class he's ever fought at. He's never been past middleweight, so we'll have to see about that. But I still think Golovkin might be a notable win. I think that if Charlo beat him, it'd be a notable win for him. If Demetrius Andrade beat him, right? If Munguia beat him, they'd be notable wins for them. So why wouldn't it be why is there different rules for Canelo? I don't think it really works that way. Then his third fight, right? We got to see where it goes. That might be like a Ryder. I don't think Ryder's a notable win. In my opinion, I don't think Ryder's a notable win. But there's a chance he goes undisputed at 175, which would be Biravev or Joe Smith. I imagine it's Biravev. He still has Charlo out there. There's news dropped today that Earl Spence was a possible opponent if he was going to stay at PBC at 164, which is the fight that I don't really like. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't really care for that fight. I don't care for fights where it really does nothing for. If say Canelo wins, it does nothing for him, and if Spence loses, it doesn't mean anything. Only thing that's going to happen is just the damage he takes and how that affects his career going forward. Now, does that mean that this fight will always never mean anything? That's not the case. I'm saying from Spence, who fought at 147 his whole life, to make the jump all the way, like 20 pounds to 164 to fight Canelo, I don't like it. I don't think it does anything for Canelo's career. I think we go in there with an obvious excuse for why this fight will have the result that it will have, right? When I think that Spence, if he goes to 154, he shows that he's still very good at 154, even goes to 160 and shows that, then you would say, okay, let's make this happen. But you want some credibility before you make that fight happen. And I truly think that why do that to Spence at this point in his career when he still has a great run and he still has a weight class 154 and 160 ahead of him? I don't like moves like that. It reminds me of Kell Brook, Triple G. I never liked fights like that. I don't want to see it. It doesn't interest me at this point. But that was a fight that was possible, right? And you have Benavidez. So there's still notable names to add on this list, and this is turning into to me a legendary list, right? By the end of this guy's career, I think it's going to be a list you could put in with, to me, all-time greats and be like, look at his notable wins. Look at this guy's notable wins. It's one of those lists, and especially if you're calculating for like all the weight classes he's moving up to add these names. Now we get to the Bivol fight, so let's pull that bad boy back up. What is this fight going to really look like, right? Now I said he's a top 5 opponent. It'd be a top 5 win for Canelo. So it's a legit fight, even though people are going to try to downplay it because it's really because of Bivol's not the fight that they wanted. People wanted Charlo. People wanted Benavidez because they're more well-known here, right? They got a fan base here. It would be a bigger fight here in the States. I agree with you on that. But that doesn't knock how good Bivol is. It's not always a popularity contest, right? Bivol is a legit 175. He's in the argument for me in the top 2 of the best guy at 175. So you can't say, oh, this isn't a legit opponent, or and if you feel like, because you feel like this is an easy fight for Canelo, you feel like Canelo's going to win for sure. That still doesn't knock the win. That just shows you how good Canelo is. So that's the thing, that when these guys get so good and you expect them to win, that's just like the criticism I'm hearing for Shakur, is you expect him to win the fight. So then it starts knocking the W, right? It starts saying like, well, that win's not as good because I expected him to win. And it's like, well, who else are you supposed to fight? Is this the number 2 guy in the weight? Is this the, labeled number 1 guy at the weight class? So just because he's supposed to beat that guy, we're going to take credit from the win? I don't think it works that way. Like I said, I don't think that's the way it works. So this is a legit opponent, and this is a guy with legit skill. Now you're talking about Bivol. It's a guy that is pretty damn well rounded. He has good speed. He has pop. He has good leg movement. He has good size. He can do a lot of things. He's very smart in the ring, high ring IQ. Now, is he a little bit predictable with his combos? Yes, he is. Does he move kind of straight back? Yes, but it's a pretty fast step back. He has a pretty fast step back. And you've seen using Shakur again, how good that could really be if you have a fast step back. Even if you're moving straight back, if you're confident in that step back, and when you step back, you can attack off of it. That makes it even harder to chase you, right? Because you might walk into something. Now, he's not as good as Shakur with that step back. I just want to make sure that I'm clear with that. He is defensively aware too. So I'm very curious how this fight plays out. Now, a lot of people use the Kovalev fight as an example. And if you remember the Kovalev fight, Kovalev is kind of keeping Canelo at range and using a high work rate with like putting not a lot into his punches. I remember watching that fight live and thinking that this fight was very close and maybe that Kovalev was winning the fight. As I watched it studying for this fight, I realized that Kovalev was not winning this fight. Kovalev was throwing a lot of punches, right? It wasn't having a high work rate. A lot of his stuff was just kind of settling on Canelo's high guard. And Canelo, when he started letting go of shots, like around third round, to me, it was like clear that he was wrapping up a lot of these rounds because his shots were clearly landing. There was no doubt about it. They were very effective, and there was a lot on them. There was a big impacts when he landed. When Bivol was just kind of like just tapping, kind of remind me of almost like Conor McGregor when he fought Floyd, and he's just like kind of like tapping tapping Floyd with like the little jab. It's like not really effective. Yes, he's technically scoring points, but to me, it just was very clear that Canelo's work was just a lot better than Kovalev's in that fight. The thing is with Bivol is, Kovalev folds late in that fight. I don't know if Bivol folds, right? I've never really seen him hurt. Now Joe Smith caught him, but I just don't see. I find it really hard to believe that Canelo's just going to be able to, land a big power shot at some point in this fight and just be able to end it. I don't think that. I think that Bivol might be durable enough to where I feel like this fight goes to decision. Now, like saying before, when I saw the Kovalev fight live, if that fight would have won the decision, I would have been kind of worried, been like, I kind of feel like Kovalev's going to win this fight. But with Bivol, like I said, after I watched it, I thought Canelo was clearly in the lead. But Bivol's in his prime. He's fast with good legs and better legs than what Kovalev had at that point, or ever really at any point in his career, as far as like speed and explosion. And if Bivol can kind of like stay in the bicycle and kind of make Canelo have to walk into shots, we get interesting. Now, Canelo has very good speed at 175. That really stood out, and especially in the Kovalev fight. He's very good now, like with people that do move away from him, because he did have that kind of a problem with that. I even kind of noticed in the Plant fight a little bit. I was like, if you can move around the ring, you could give him problems. Now, Bivol doesn't really move around the ring like Plant or that style, right? That would kind of give Canelo a lot of problems, but he does have footwork and he does have, fast feet at times. So Canelo's going to have to slowly eat away at that space. But another thing I noticed with Bivol is that like recently it wasn't as, his movement was not as fluid as it was before. And he was not really taking the chances that maybe I noticed before in his career. Now, maybe the skill levels went up on the guys. I don't necessarily, the opponent list that he has doesn't necessarily kind of like show evidence that the skill level's going like at this some high level that he wasn't fighting at before. I think that, I don't know. I think he's definitely become more cautious. The one thing I did notice is in the Richards fight is that Richard was able to land stuff. It did make Bivol kind of step up his game a little bit, especially his offense. So I think that this fight might actually turn out to be pretty good, because I think that Canelo's for sure going to land stuff. He's for sure going to be effective. He's going to be able to counter off his jab with his overhand right. He's going to test every time Bivol jumps in with his, like his 1-2-1 combo. Canelo's going to test his body. He's going to test a left hook counter on that. I think Bivol this is gonna make Bivol kind of a more entertaining fighter than we're used to seeing. I think a lot of people were expecting like a boring fight and kind of expecting Bivol to kind of like shell up like Smith did. I don't see that. I think that he has the kind of game where it will step up with higher level competition, especially if he's forced to step up, if he's forced to have to show something to win the fight. I think that you might see the Bivol. Now, I see people picking Bivol to win this fight. I see the reasoning for that. That's not insane to me. Actually, Bivol won this fight. I wouldn't be surprised at all because Bivol is very good. I told you at 175. He has a lot of abilities. Now, how do I see the fight playing out? I think Canelo starts off applying pressure. I don't think Bivol's going to move around like Caleb Plant or like that. That's not in his style. I don't think he's going to move like that. Now, will he have leg movements? Will he step back to get out of range? Yes. But I think that there's going to be a lot of in-range fighting and very tactical. And Bivol's going to pick his shots on Canelo's guard. And Canelo's going to look to counter him at points and take some chances to push him back. And it's going to be a challenge of jabs. And a lot of people saying that Bivol doesn't really have that power jab that like Golovkin does, or like even Charlo, as they were saying that gives Canelo problems. Bivol has a decent jab. It's a fast jab. It kind of uses it to set up his other stuff. It doesn't really use it to keep someone in a place or, as a defensive mechanism. It's more to get his offense going. And I expect that to be used, but I also expect Canelo to use his jab. He has a very strong jab, very powerful jab. It's a kind of a one-off in his jab. He's not going to double it up. He kind of just boom, one explosive thing, and it kind of uses that to build his momentum coming forward. I expect them to challenge each other with the jab. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting exchanges in this fight. I do believe that Bivol will become a little bit more predictable as this fight goes on. And a guy like Canelo, who's making adjustments and able to read those things, will land a lot more clear going later in the fight. And he's going to clearly win the later rounds. I expect the first few rounds to be very competitive. I expect this fight to be competitive pretty much throughout. Maybe a lot more like the Jacobs fight, where they're kind of in each other's range, picking shots, but very tactical, very chess-like. I'm going to take Canelo to win a decision in this fight. I expect it to be a tough fight. I expect Bivol's game to really step up, and I expect it to be a lot more entertaining than what people are expecting, because I think that Bivol will move at times. But what I've noticed is that when he needs to win a fight, he's not afraid to kind of stay in range and trade shots and look to find his spot and play that game. So I'm going to take Canelo in this fight. I think it's a big win for him. I think it's a close fight. I think it's a fight, though, that he clearly wins. I don't think there's going to be a lot of people calling out for robbery or controversy. I just think that Canelo's adjustments, his power carrying late, his speed carrying late, and the way he starts just kind of seeing the timing, and Bivol just kind of become a little more predictable later in the fight. I'm going to take Canelo to win the fight. Now, where does Canelo go from there? It looks like it's going to be Triple G. Like I said, I still think Triple G at this point is a notable win for Canelo. I think that might be controversial. I think that might be up for debate. I'm definitely going to probably put that on Twitter and see what people say. But it's Triple G. And then where it gets interesting is the third fight, right? The third fight that, was brought to my attention that it really isn't a part of the deal that he has, right? He doesn't necessarily have to stay with third fight with DAZN. Now, I think there's definitely an option for a third fight with the terms in place, but I think that's where it's going to get definitely very interesting to see, what Canelo's looking to do, because, Undisputed will be there for him at 175 if he wants to go fight at Top Rank, right? And Top Rank's been making a lot of moves lately. So the Top Rank could wrap up a Canelo fight. I mean, that'd be huge for them as well, especially with the stars they brought in and the schedule, the pretty big fights as far as like, Shakur just fought Haney versus Kambosos. They could bring in Canelo, and then they have with also, just throw with him facing the winner, Beershevia versus Joe Smith, which will be another fight that they throw on ESPN. That I'm very interested to see what that third fight is for him. He also has, like I said, Charlo, who's fighting Selecki coming up in a few weeks. He'll have Benavidez, who's fighting Lemieux in a few weeks. Zerto is also there. There's a few English names thrown out. Ryder, which to me is like the least interesting option of that choice. I would have preferred if Ryder had fought Demetrius Andrade like around this point, and then the winner would have faced that at least. So that's like at least some buildup. Like, you're facing at least the best guy of those two. But that's where it's going to be interesting going forward. But I tell you, like Canelo, he's only what 31, 32 years old. He's still got a lot of boxing ahead of him. And there's a lot of big names he could be adding to this list of notable wins. I will be doing a post-fight show on this. So thank you guys for listening. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please follow me at Ezra podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Please like and subscribe. And this podcast can also be can be listened to on Spotify and Apple. You don't have to see my face. The face is a bonus feature to it, but there's an option without the face. You know what I mean? So I do give you that too. I give you all the options. You get to decide. Thank you guys for listening.